Thank you for that introduction, Chico. It means the world. We come from the same place, and to be in a position of leadership, coming from where you come from and holding to those values, will allow you to ascend from being a local joker to the White House and then back again. And so your leadership and your leadership journey is something. Yeah, you can clap for that. We are all incredibly proud of. I am truly honored to be among your inaugural cohort to share some of my learnings with you all tonight. If you know anything about me there, I know that we have several people here from the area. I always start with where I'm from. I'm from 624 West Division, from the Cabrini Green Public Housing Projects. This is a room of seasoned people. So I don't have to really explain too much about what Cabrini is or was. I was at Notre Dame yesterday, and these poor kids only know Cabrini from Candyman. But this is a crowd that would get good times. So I come from one of the toughest public housing projects in the country. I was born there in the 70s. My mother was 17 when she had my brother, 18 when she had me. My mother dropped out of high school shortly after giving birth to me. I start there because when we talk about crime and violence and the stuff that you all deal with and know and work with, and we get fancy with our terminology about criminogenic factors, I'm about to tell you all of the criminogenic factors that I had in my life. Born to a teenage mother, living in concentrated poverty, living in public housing. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. My mother suffered from bipolar disorder but wasn't diagnosed till she was almost 50 years old. She smoked weed every day. I grew up with people who were hustlers, people who lived their lives on the fringe trying to survive. In Cabrini, we had the original gig economies of like people riding people to church, making fish dinners, taking care of one another. Those criminogenic factors, poverty, abuse, living in communities that had been disinvested, I had every factor that would lead me into the criminal justice system, but just not as its chief prosecutor.
Oh, girl.
There's no difference between myself as the chief prosecutor, the second largest prosecutor's office in the country, and a woman of my age sitting in Cook County Jail or in one of our state prisons. The biggest difference when people say, well, how did you make it out? It is absolutely based on the supposition that I was supposed to fail. Many of us in this room have defied all odds. How did we do it? It was very much a combination of luck, a prayerful grandmother, and a hustling mother. My mother was a hustler. She's a hustler. I describe myself, it's really funny, this job, I wear suits, and you go, and I have met presidents, and I've met secretaries of state, and I meet whatever, and at my heart, I'm a project chick. The song come on at the club, I'm dancing, project chick. I am, and why do I do that? In this venerable institution, I'm at the University of Chicago, one of the most prestigious universities in the country. I tell you unapologetically and unequivocally, I'm a project chick. And that sets the agenda and the tone for how I lead. Because I have seen for so long, so many people who come from neighborhoods like ours, who are first generation folks, who get opportunities, who believe that we must shed the very lived experience that makes us uniquely qualified to change our world. You can be an academic, and we are at a university, so I have great respect for academics. You can read every book. You can read every story. You can immerse yourself in every lecture. But what I have, what I know, is in depth what it means to be impacted by violence in a criminal legal system that has disregarded so many like myself. That special knowledge, that knowledge that you all have as leaders that you cannot learn in a university, is what makes your leadership unique, special, and absolutely necessary.
That's right.
As Chico says, if you live here, even if you don't, people got a lot of shit to say about me. I would just be honest. A lot. And I think a lot of it comes from me not pulling back from the unvarnished truths of the systems for which we work. I'm the first black woman to hold this position. I'm the first black person elected to this position. In a county like Cook, which has the largest single-site jail in the country, which is the second largest prosecutor's office in the country, where 76% of the people in Cook County Jail were black men. And where we see the rising number of black women who are coming in through our system, where the victims of violent crime look like me and you. That the perspectives of those who've been impacted by these systems have never been represented in the system.
Yeah, that's right.
In a county like Cook. So when I came into leadership, when I came into this role as the first, there tends to be this thing when we get into rooms where we're not used to being, I'm often the only. There are 102 state attorneys in Illinois. 102. I am the only black one. And I've been the only black one for a while in this state. And it is because of that I get in these rooms where people who don't believe that I deserve to be there, who my very presence is disruptive. I don't have to say a word. I just have to show up black and white. But I show up. And we tend, when we get into these rooms, to shrink. And I don't shrink. And that is destabilizing for people who have a status quo. And if I say Black Lives Matter, it is not a signal that all lives don't matter. When I say that our system has a history of structural racism that is evident by the documents that you can read in this university, and that we have a responsibility to do better, that challenges the status quo.
That's right.
And so the attacks will come. But as the only black person in the state of Illinois who holds this position out of 102, being undeterred by those who don't want my presence and fueled by those who didn't make it to where I am. I am no better. I am no better than those who didn't make it. But I have an affirmative responsibility when I get seats at tables. And the other thing is, I don't just get seats at tables, I set tables.
That's right.
I send out the invites. I say whose voices are going to be heard. And when we do that, when we set tables, when we bring those who are impacted by systems, ooh, let me tell you what can happen. Because the leadership isn't just about what you do alone. It isn't. I have a big institution that I work with, but some of our biggest wins have come from people who have been impacted by the system leading. If you don't know, now you know. Illinois is the first state in the country to abolish cash bail.
That's right.
The first state in the country to abolish cash bail. I have been advocating for bail reform from the moment that I got here. The Coalition to End Money Bond, people who have been impacted by the bail system, activists and advocates gravitating together and allowing a prosecutor to come and be a part of it. And it meant that I had to use my power and my privilege and my office to start implementing policies before they ever became real, to show people what was possible.
That's right.
And then their movement and their momentum and their courage enabled us to do what we did. We legalized marijuana here a few years ago. And it was because we knew that brothers and sisters were going to jail for years for selling, using marijuana, and now we have people like John Boehner and rich white folks making money hand over fist in the marijuana industry while people who lived in our communities had gotten impacted. So we're pushed for legalization, not because I was trying to get everybody to get high, don't do that. But it is legal here, don't drive. But because it was inequitable, it was unfair, and I remember my mother. I centered that. And so I pushed, as one of the only prosecutors to push for legalization of marijuana and for the vacating of convictions of anybody who was previously convicted for amounts that were now legal, and you don't have to pay to do it. We did that on their behalf. we gonna lock up people for driving on suspended licenses, and their licenses were suspended because they couldn't afford to pay their tickets, so then we put them in jail and then make them pay a bail and then ask them to pay their tickets? Where does the money come from when we keep taking money out of people's pockets?
That's right.
It takes knowing somebody who's had a suspended license. It takes knowing people who had the boot. It takes knowing people who have been impacted by the system and being unapologetic about that experience and saying we can do better.
That's right.
It's the same thing with bail. It's about knowing people who had to have fish fries on Friday night to see if we can get enough money together by Saturday or Sunday, by Monday when the jailhouse opened, to allow someone charged with a nonviolent offense to come home. Because we recognize that if they're not home and they lose that job or they lose that housing, that destabilizing effect causes people to do what they need to do to survive. Because we know survivors, because we know hustlers, because we know systems. It is the lived experience that guides your leadership. And so my thoughts to all of you, I announced I'm not running for re-election earlier this year.